Hey, what is going on, guys? In today's video, we're going to do a full weapon ranking of every single gun in EZFN Season 4. Quickly go over the tiers. So X tier, I've considered to be those completely dominant weapons. Like, they break the entire game meta. Think like the double spaz in Season 7 of EZFN. That runs so quickly, it's so unbelievably busted. You basically have to use it. So that's what I consider to be an X tier weapon. S tier, think like the double hump right now. The double hump is very good right now in Season 4. You could even argue it's too strong. But it's not so busted to the point where it defines the entire meta. There are definitely other options. And it's, not completely busted, but still overall a really, really strong option. You could argue a slight nerf. A tier, think like the Scar, right? Very good, solid weapon. A lot of people are going to want to run this. I don't think it needs a nerf by any means, but it's a very competitive gun. You're probably going to be excited to find an A tier weapon. B tier are kind of those decent options, right? Like the gray through blue AR. Nobody really has an issue with that. It's not an exceptional weapon, but it's not terrible either. It's just a decent, viable choice. C, think like the silence pistol, right? Like, situationally, these weapons can work pretty well, but they're not amazing, so it's really going to be, can you get yourself in the right situation to use this for it to be effective? It's just kind of meh weapons. D tier are those weapons you really want to get rid of early game. Like the standard pistol is not very good. It's not laughably bad, but it's still not great. And then F tier, I don't think any F tier weapons exist, but think like the day one semi-auto sniper or the, launch full auto sniper or the hunter fiend crossbow, right? These are weapons that are just painfully, painfully bad. And it's honestly laughable just how useless they are. And with that, let's start going over the weapons. Let's start out with the shotguns, and the first shotgun is the pump shotgun. Pump shotgun is a really strong option right now, but overall, I think it's an S tier weapon. It's really good because you have really three things it does really well. One, incredible headshot damage. You could easily one-shot people if you can line up the shot. Two, very good wall damage. With 100 wall damage, you can blast out freshly built walls. And three, you're able to double pump, which is obviously very useful. But the one major disadvantage of the pump that I think stops it from being X tier is the draw speed is incredibly slow. It's much slower than the other two shotguns. And what that means is you really have to take into account when you're playing this thing aggressively and on offense, you have to take in mind that if you make an edit play, you're going to have a long draw, and if you're out of position, your enemy with another shotgun can easily pre-fire you, or even with a pump shotgun already out, they can also pre-fire you. But you just have to keep in mind that if you're making an aggressive play and need to draw your shotgun, it's going to take a long time. So I definitely say this is definitely a shotgun you should absolutely try out. It works great in a variety of combos. Double pump, pump heavy, pump tac, pump SMG, whatever you really want. It can lead that, initial shot before you follow up with something else. It's a really solid option, but I don't think it's outright mandatory because the other shotguns I also think are perfectly competitive, as well as some SMGs as well. Let's move on to the heavy shotgun. Heavy shotgun barely does more damage than the tac shotgun. So at first glance, you might think this thing really doesn't make a lot of sense. It does 3 more damage than the tac shotgun, but shoots a lot slower. But the heavy shotgun has the same draw speed as the tac, which means double heavy is very fast, much quicker than double pump. You're still able to do 100 wall damage, which means you can continuously blast out walls at a much quicker rate than you can with double pump. You have really good range because of that tight spread. Overall, I'd say the heavy shotgun is also an S tier option. Pump versus heavy, you're trading the ability to one-shot, which definitely is very important for a much quicker draw speed and a little more range. So really, I think those two are very 50-50 over which one you take. For me, I much prefer the heavy shotgun. I much prefer it's more reliable in the sense that you're able to shoot a little faster, tighter spread. But if you prefer the pump shotgun, by all means, go ahead. Those are both very competitive options. Moving on to the tac shotgun, I was debating whether the tac shotgun should be S tier or A tier. I could see an argument for either, but I think I'm going to put it A. It's still a really good option, don't get me wrong. I think it's like equal to the Scar in power level. But I think the tac shotgun just doesn't have as much versatility in your loadout as the pump or heavy do. Because there's really two parts of your close range combo, right? You have your initiation, which is like your first shot, right? That you typically have a shotgun with, and then your follow-up. That's either another shotgun, usually it would be a quicker rate of fire shotgun, but doesn't have to be, or an SMG. And the problem with the tac is the tac has a hard time leading that initial shot, right? If you're doing a shotgun SMG combo, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to use the tac, because you might as well take the increased range of the heavy or the increased damage of the pump. So really, the tac shotgun is more regulated to that secondary role. It's still very good in that secondary role. Pump tac is still a very competitive combo, and I think heavy tac is still viable. But I just don't think it is quite as versatile. If you're a newer player, though, and struggle with aim, tac shotgun can still be a really good option I'd overall say it's A tier. Solid option, but just not quite as strong as the pump or heavy. Let's move on to the ARs now. In terms of the Scar is an easy A tier. Still a very competitive option. Throughout the entirety of Chapter 1, it's very competitive. If you find this thing, you're going to want to run it. The Burst Rifle is a competitor, but overall, I would say the Scar is the best AR overall. The standard AR, Gray through Blue, I just put it a tier lower in B. Doing a few less damage means it takes 7 shots to eliminate someone from full health instead of 6. So that definitely is noticeable, but the standard AR is still perfectly fine. Even a gray AR into the end game, no problems. Very reliable. Pretty much everyone should try this thing out and see if they like it because it's just very consistent and it can work at pretty much any range. Moving on to the Burst Rifle, I'd say the Burst Rifle is a step below on both rarities. So the FAMAS Purple Gold I put in B tier, and then the standard Burst Rifle, Gray through Blue, I'd put in C tier. It's definitely a decent option. On controller, I actually think it's a bit better than maybe B and C tier respectively, but on keyboard it's probably a bit worse, so I'd probably average it out to there. Still something worth trying out to see if it fits your playstyle. You know, the Burst Rifle is less versatile because at long range, you're basically wasting 2 of your shots. Because they're so far away, they're just going to go sideways. But at that medium range where you're doing quick peeks, right? The Burst Rifle can be really effective and better than the Scar in that situation. So, it's situational, but it still, I think, is a viable option. The Scope DR, I'd overall say is C tier. Scope DR, it's very consistent, but the DPS is just painfully low. You're doing in the realm of around 80 DPS, which is just not very good. Yes, you can consistently hit those shots, but I think you're better off just tap firing a standard AR. You can hit almost the same DPS at long range. You're doing almost the same damage, if not the same damage with the Scar. I just don't think the Scope DR is that good, but it's not the worst weapon in the world. You could also argue that LMG is sort of an AR class. I'd say it's B tier. It's kind of a AR minigun SMG hybrid because it has a huge magazine which acts more like the minigun, but it's got, you know, a quicker draw. And it's super inaccurate, but has a long effective range because of first shot accuracy. Overall, I'd say it's a decent option. If you run it as an AR replacement, you could run it as an SMG replacement. I just don't think it excels in any one category that well against the TAC SMG or the Scar, but it's still a decent option. And if you like running it, having that huge mag, definitely viable. Okay, let's move on to the SMGs now. Starting out with the TAC SMG. TAC SMG, I think, is A tier. It's a very competitive option. You know, if you compare it against the standard SMG from Season 5, once it got nerfed, and I put that B tier, you know, the TAC SMG does a little bit more DPS, a little bit quicker rate of fire, which is helpful for getting through builds. Yeah, it does just the tiniest bit less damage, but 5 extra rounds and a longer effective range. You have first shot accuracy. Overall, I'd say the TAC SMG is just that little bit better to bump it up to A tier. It's a very competitive weapon. And if you don't like running double shotgun, pump or heavy, the TAC SMG is still a very competitive option. This thing actually really, you know, takes the fight to double shotgun because I think it's still very competitive. You have a longer effective range, can more effectively spray through builds at the cost of having big burst damage for your second shot. So up to you which combo you run, but definitely a weapon I'd say it's worth trying. Let's move on to the Silence SMG. Silence SMG, I'm going to put B tier. Against the Silence SMG of Season 7, you do 2 less damage, so that really cuts into its close range effectiveness, but it has significantly less damage fall off, which means it's better as an AR replacement. The Silence SMG I kind of think is like the LMG, where it's a decent choice. It can replace both an AR and an SMG, but I also don't think it necessarily excels in any role. I think it's B. You could even say C. It's just kind of decent option. Honestly, if you really want to run a true SMG, you're probably better off with the TAC SMG. True AR, you're probably better off with the AR. If for some reason you need to run a double shotgun and another weapon, and the Silence SMG is available, could be something worth using as like end game. You may not need super long range, so it could be worth trying. But that's kind of where I think the Silence SMG is. Okay, let's move on to the pistols now. Starting off with the standard pistol, I think the standard pistol is D tier. The blue variant, I think, is C because it does 25, which reduces 1 less shot you need to eliminate someone. But the gray and green at 23 and 24 is not good. 5 shots to eliminate someone early game, that's not a good situation. It's just not a weapon you really want to be carrying long term. So I try and get rid of it as soon as you can. Next, the Silence Pistol. Silence Pistol is a decent bit better. I put it C tier. Situationally, the Silence Pistol really does work. But if I think about it, does it really make sense to carry this thing over a TAC SMG or an AR? I just think the answer is no. At close range, you have less DPS, and a much smaller magazine than the tactical SMG. And at long range, you have the magazine disadvantage. You know, you don't do quite as much damage. Overall, I just say the silenced pistol, I just don't think makes a ton of sense. You know, when you get it in that perfect window and it just beams someone, yes, it feels good. It can be fun. It's just not a weapon that I see as being B tier. I think it's just situationally okay in C. Next, the Revolver. Revolver, I think, is D tier. Honestly, where are you supposed to use the Revolver? At close range, it does 60 damage, sure, but attack shotgun can outdamage you. At medium range, you're probably getting a little bit of fall off. Maybe you're doing like 45, not terrible, but pretty quickly, once you get to long range, you're doing literally 20 damage. And, you know, the Scar, or even the standard AR, is also doing around 20 damage. So what's the point of this thing? It doesn't outdamage the ARs at long range. At close range, it's outclassed by the shotguns. I just don't think this thing does anything very well. It can be kind of fun, but before first shot accuracy, it was doing, you know, 150 headshots. It just can't do that anymore. I just don't really see a reason to use the Revolver. Moving on to the hand cannon. Hand cannon, I think, is definitely a step up. Yes, it shoots a tiny bit slower, but its damage more than makes up for it. Hand cannon at long range is a pretty similar story. It does 30 damage. If you can hit even 2 shots with the AR for every 1 shot you hit the hand cannon, you're out damaging the hand cannon easily. And you know, that close medium ranges where you can hit like still like 70 damage, and while the shotgun really can't, yeah, the hand cannon can be situationally good in that situation. But overall, I just don't think the hand cannon is all that great. It only does 80 wall damage. It's very situational. So I just put it in C tier where it's situationally okay, but it's just not a weapon that I see as being particularly competitive. Now moving to the snipers, starting with the bolt action, and honestly the hunting rifle, but bolt action we'll start off with. They're both B tier. I think the bolt action is actually your highest damage sniper without the heavy. So if you really like the super long range and hitting one shots, bolt action is great, right? You have to remember in this period, the snipers have a slower projectile travel time, so you have to lead a little bit more and give more, aim a little bit higher. But overall, I still think the bolt action is B tier. It's a solid weapon. It's harder to justify because you want to run double shotgun. You'd have to run 4 weapons or no AR to do that. But it's still a very competitive choice. Up to you whether you want to run it. Hunting rifle, very similar deal. You know, it does a little bit less damage, but it shoots faster. No scope, so it's more effective at closer ranges, less effective far away. Still a very competitive option. And if you like running the hunting, more power to you. Both of these are very competitive. It's up to you whether you want to run them, though. They're not required. Moving on to the semi-auto sniper. Semi-auto, I say, is C tier. It's not very good. It only does 66 damage. I almost want to put it D, but I don't because I think the semi-auto is situationally decent for learning how to snipe. You know, the fast fire rate really helps you in learning the projectile travel time as well as how much drop there is. I think it is worth considering to use if you're, you know, haven't really sniped much. Might be a weapon you could practice with. But overall, it's maybe on the fringes of being C tier. It might honestly be D tier. It's just, why would you carry a sniper that really isn't able to one-shot? This thing just isn't very competitive, and it's all right, but I really think you should either carry a true sniper, the hunting, or bolt. Once you've learned sniping, carry a true sniper, or just drop it altogether. I'd only really use this thing as a learning tool. Finally, moving on to the structure destroyers. RPG, I think, is A tier. At this time, the explosives don't do as much splash in that they need line of sight to destroy builds. So oftentimes they'll only destroy one wall. But you have to remember at this time, the RPG reloads are much faster. It's reloading in like the low 2-second range. Season 7, it's more like the mid 3-second range. So that really helps. I still think the RPG is A tier. It's much more spammable in this period. Still a very competitive weapon that's really useful to have. Grenade launcher, I think, is a step down. It's still decent, but the grenade launcher, you know, didn't get any reload buffs going from Season 7 to Season 4, but you have the explosives change that makes it less effective at blowing things up. So it's still a decent option. Because you build slower, I still think it's B tier, as it's harder to counter in that sense, but it doesn't do as much, you know, raw explosive damage in that it can't destroy huge amounts of builds. So I'd still put it B tier. Finally, the minigun. The minigun I think is C at this point. Because it has a slow windup, I think it's very situational. In squads, I'd say it's probably B tier. It's really quite decent in squads, as one person can lay down suppressing fire. But in solos, with double shotgun running around, TAC SMG, it's not even like you're winning DPS battles. You know, double pump can clip you out. The TAC SMG out DPSs you. I just don't think it's that great, but situationally decent. So, that's kind of my overall rankings here. I'd really say any shotgun is competitive. In terms of the ARs, you can run the standard AR, burst AR, LMG can kind of work, silenced SMG can kind of work. Your SMG options, tactical SMG, LMG and silenced SMG are also kind of SMG class-like weapons. None of the pistols are really all that competitive. In terms of your snipers, I recommend hunting or bolt action. If you're learning and new to sniping, semi-auto also works. And then structured destroyers, I'd say RPG and grenade launcher are both viable, with the minigun being an option in squads. And with that, I hope this video was interesting, and I'll catch you in the next one.